I wanted to talk about a problem in the industry that frustrates anyone with an IQ north of 9. The industry is unstable for a lot of reasons, some of which we have already talked about. But there is a particular darkness that players either ignore or just do not talk about. Something that sits underneath every patch note, every delay, every studio closure, where a dog can only get kicked so many times before it tries to do something. This is that conversation. May 2003, Los Angeles, E3. Joseph Staten walks out onto a stage and plays a demo of Halo 2 to a live audience. The crowd loses its mind. Dual wielding. Covenant City streets. A ghost hijack mid-fight. The kind of gaming moment people still talk about in the present tense. The kind of thing that made you feel like the future was here and it had a controller in your hand. It was a Tuesday for me, November 9th, launch day. My stepbrother and I would not shut up about this release, bugging my father, bugging each other for weeks. Leading up to it, Halo was already plenty big to me. Combat Evolved had done something to my brain I was not fully equipped to explain at that age. But Halo 2 was a different animal. We stood up playing the campaign, standing because sitting felt wrong for it, playing the multiplayer on Xbox Live until the controllers were warm. I did not fully understand what crunch was at that time. I did not know what the people who made that game had gone through to get it into my hands. I just knew the game felt like nothing else. Well, 7 days before that E3 demo, it was running at 5 to 10 frames per second. Jason Jones said that himself in 2013. The demo that defined a console generation, the one that sold systems before the game had even had a release date, was basically broken a week before they even showed it to the world. The code underneath was so fragile that if anybody had deviated even slightly from the rehearsed path, it would crash immediately. The whole thing was held together by the same thing that built it. People who cared too much to let it fall apart on a stage in Los Angeles. Frank O'Connor confirmed years later that they looked at including it in the Master Chief Collection and found the source code was still just as broken. The demo that the entire industry treated as proof of what games could be could not safely be played off script 20 years after it was shown. When the DigSite team eventually rebuilt it for MCC, they were working through over 3,000 lines of barely documented script, written under an insane crunch almost 20 years prior, with almost no documentation left behind. One team member described it as the hardest thing they had ever worked on. It was complex. But again, the team cared to make it survivable for anyone who came after. The crowd cheering in that room was cheering the dual-wielding, the Covenant, the Master Chief standing unyielding. Microsoft saw the struggle behind it and still gave the team barely enough time to get it right. We look back on Halo 2 and call it legendary for its development, for its campaign, for what it delivered, and it was. But legend has a way of laundering what actually happened. What that room also contained underneath, the crowd noise and the hardware sales projections, was proof of concept. A proof that you could extract the extraordinary work from people who love something too much to let it look bad on stage. The industry took notes. There is a book I recommend, dear viewer, if you want to go deeper in on any of this. It's called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. He is one of the better investigative journalists covering this industry, and the book holds up. He spent years interviewing developers across 10 different games, big studios and solo projects, AAA and indie. The games are wildly different. The studios are different. The budgets are different. But the one thing that remains consistent across almost every single chapter is a term the industry normalized a long time ago: crunch. Crunch is the period, usually toward the end of development, where the hours become unsustainable. 60, 70, 80 hours a week, doesn't matter. Weekends are gone. Personal life paused. It happens because games are late, or because the scope grew past what the schedule could hold, or because someone in a boardroom somewhere moved the ship date without anyone asking. It happens in small studios where one person's passion project becomes a multi-year sprint with no days off. It happens in giant studios with hundreds of employees and 9-figure budgets. Schreier documents it, across all of them. The reason it keeps happening is not that the industry hasn't figured out how to stop it. It's that the industry has figured out that it doesn't have to. Because people who stay late are not staying late because they were told to. They are staying because the work matters to them. Because they cannot leave a broken thing broken if they have the skill to fix it. Because their name is going to end on the credits someday, and they would rather sleep at the office than ship something they are not proud of. That feeling is also the mechanism by which the industry extracts free labor at scale. Schreier covers Destiny's development specifically. A studio trying to build a shared world shooter with no real template for what that even meant. Nearly torn apart by the ambition of what they were attempting. The story Bungie told mid-development. What players got was a game where the lore lived on a separate website because there was no time or space to put it in the game itself. A certain cutscene alludes to this.
Well fought.
You're here.
We haven't got much time.
Who are you?
Why have you been watching us?
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain. I will. I know.
Will what?
I wasn't talking to you, little light. Many Guardians fell.
And like I said last week, hollow walls, but extraordinary bones. People played it anyway, because the bones were that good. They shipped it anyway, because that is what Bungie does, and because the people who made it could not finish it. The games industry runs on passion. Everyone inside of it knows this. A developer who loves what they are making will still absorb conditions that workers in most other fields would not accept. Missed deadlines become personal failures. Canceled projects become grief. Revenue targets issued by a CFO land on a creative director like a personal accusation. Because for that person, it's personal. The game is personal. The work is personal. And somewhere up the ladder, someone learned that and built a model around it. The love is the lever. It has always been the lever. This is not exclusive to games, and I apologize to anyone that works in a field where this is more prevalent. Most people who care about the work that they do have felt this at some point. The expectation that caring means absorbing. That if you really love the work, you will find a way to get it done regardless of what you were given to do with it. Before COVID, I had to set up an entire warehouse infrastructure in a single shift. 10 computers, phones, the punch clock, the printers and scanners used for invoicing. A generation of colleagues that did not understand that turning it off and on again solved most problems, collecting a paycheck as if they did. Thankless is the only word I can say. You do it because it is your job, and you want it done. The games industry just found a way to package that feeling and run a company on it. 20 years after that legendary E3 demo, the studio now called Halo Studios, formerly 343 Industries, is showing the same symptoms with new paint. A buddy of mine sent me a Windows Central article, and it sent me down a road I did not expect to be on this week when I started writing. The rebrand itself was supposed to mean something. Leave the 343 era behind, start fresh. But a name change does not fix the foundation. The art direction under 343 shifted away from the Bungie aesthetic, starting with Halo 4. And the community spent years loudly objecting to it. Halo Infinite walked some of that back. The campaign of Halo 5 was so broadly considered a misfire that the studio effectively abandoned its own story threads going into Infinite rather than continue them. The Slipspace engine, custom built specifically for Infinite after years of development and significant investment, contributed to the game launching without a co-op campaign, without Forge, without the infrastructure a live service game needs at launch. The studio that had been given every resource in the most recognizable franchise in Xbox history shipped an incomplete game and called it a foundation. 343 was always in a position of scrutiny from, well, basically anyone that was anyone. Every game they shipped carried the weight of comparison to what Bungie made, which is an unfair position to be in, and also one they never fully escaped. So many mistakes, so many walkbacks, so many questions about what this franchise is supposed to be. Halo under this brand felt like a non sequitur for a long time. But what that Windows Central article made visible was that the scrutiny was not really the problem. The problem was coming from inside the building. Glenn Israel spent over 17 years with this franchise going back to Halo 3 ODST. That's definitely not brief tenure. This is someone who was there when Bungie was still in the room and stayed through every iteration of what the studio became. He left in late 2025. What came out after his departure was not a complaint about being overworked or undervalued in the standard sense. A message he sent before leaving described witnessing something he called definitely unethical and, well, possibly illegal. He did not report it internally, because he had no confidence that Microsoft HR could or would protect him from retaliation. That's not an offhand concern. It's a calculation. A person with 17 years of institutional investment and industry reputation doing the math on whether the company that employed him would protect him if he said something. His answer was no. So he documented it to someone he trusted outside the building and hoped that if things got worse, anyone would at least know. He also documented a hiring pattern. 3 of the only externally posted art leadership positions available at the studio between June 2024 and June 2025. All 3 went to former associates of the same person. He noted a possible 4th following the same pattern. His description of it was precise. Once, maybe an anomaly. Twice, a coincidence. 3 times or more as a pattern, and a direct violation of Microsoft's code of conduct. This is not a disgruntled employee venting into the void here. This is a veteran of the industry naming a specific window of time, specific roles, and somehow connecting the dots between them publicly and on record. Another former employee, Tyler Davis, said leadership had done the team dirty. It's not an abstract way of saying so. It's directly on the record. 2 separate people at 2 separate moments landing on the same description of what it felt like to work inside that studio. Then there's the dig site team, the same community modders who rebuilt the Halo 2 E3 demo from the 3,000 lines of broken crunch-era code, who spent years of their own time, unpaid, preserving content that the studio whose name was on the franchise did not have the capacity or the will to preserve themselves. They disbanded after Halo Studios, refused to pay them. One member described being told by a leader at the studio that they could leave if they wanted, since, unlike him, they were not born with a gun pointed at their head and therefore, they could not understand real stakes and consequences. Let me make sure we are both clear on what was said. People who donated their years of their own time, out of love, to preserve the work that the studio itself had abandoned, were told that their devotion was not serious enough to constitute stakes. that real stakes require the kind of desperation that comes from having no other option. That love for the craft. The kind that makes someone spend years rebuilding broken code for free doesn't count. The love was not labor. It was just available. And it was dismissed the moment it was no longer convenient. Microsoft's public response to all of it was one sentence. We do not publicly discuss individual employee issues. 17 years of service, a detailed account of hiring patterns. The team disbanded without even being paid. One sentence. And the dog continues to get kicked. Jeff Kaplan spent years as the public face of Overwatch. He was the person who stood on stage and talked to the community like they were the reason the game existed. He was not performing that like many people expect. You could tell the difference. He was the kind of creative director who made people feel like there was a human being at the center of the thing that they loved. We've all had a manager like that, I'm sure. Someone who understood why it mattered. And he said he believed he would retire from Blizzard. He said it like he meant it. Then, he got a call into the CFO's office. I've been there before. The CFO gave him a revenue number Overwatch had to hit, then told him that if he did not hit that number, 1,000 people would be laid off, and that would be on Kaplan. We're going to go over that one more time. The CFO did not frame this as a structural consequence of financial performance. He did not say if revenue falls, we will have to make decisions about headcount. That language exists, and that may be a topic for another day. It is designed specifically to make the institutional calculation sound inevitable and impersonal. He did not use it. He said it would be on you. He reached across the table in a corporate office and handed a creative director the moral weight of 1,000 people's job, tied a revenue number that Kaplan did not set, and a financial model he did not design. He placed it on the person in the room who was most likely to absorb it, the person who cared most about the game. And, well, that is the mechanism. It's not cruelty for its own sake. It's the sort of read you have on a person that you know you have control over them. And it ultimately led to Kaplan leaving. Because, why wouldn't you? The Overwatch League had been sold to investors as something approaching NFL-level commercial viability. Cities bidding on franchise slots, team merchandise, broadcast rights. The deck that was shown to the people buying in promised a scale the product could never deliver, and the development team was never consulted on. When the league's financial model started collapsing under the weight of its own promises, the resources required to prop it up came from somewhere. They came from Kaplan's team. Events that did not get made, heroes that did not get developed. Content for the players who actually showed up every day to play the game got deprioritized so that Blizzard could continue honoring commitments made to investors who had been shown a slide deck. By the time Kaplan left, the game he had helped build into one of the most successful live service titles in history was being held hostage by a parallel product that existed to serve a different audience entirely. He left in April 2021. He thought that he would never work anywhere but Blizzard. He had built his professional identity inside that building. The CFO he described is no longer working at Activision Blizzard today either, and I'll just leave it at that. I was never deep into Overwatch myself. I played my first few matches this year, in fact, after the rebrand dropped too. After they added the Italian character who I cannot, for the life of me, remember whose name it is without looking it up on Google, and I apologize for that. But it was a kinsman, and Blizzard really knows how to monetize one's culture. My girlfriend at the time was all over this franchise, so I just never had the entry point made that it felt like mine. If you know, you know. But even as an outsider, the shape of what happened to that game was legible. A live service so good it became the machine, and the person who made it good enough to become a machine walked out the door, because the CFO told him the machine's output would be his fault if it slowed down. The dog got kicked and did something else. Today you can find Kaplan working on his own game, The Legend of California. It's not Overwatch, but that seems to be very much the point.
This is what we're fighting for, Cooper. More people join every day to fight the IMC. We used to just run and hide from them. But now, we chase them.
Jason West and Vince Zampella built Call of Duty at Infinity Ward. They made Modern Warfare. They made Modern Warfare 2. Two of the most commercially successful first-person shooters in the history of the medium. Games that redefined what the genre could look like and feel like. That put Infinity Ward on the map as one of the most capable studios in the industry. And in 2010, Activision fired both of them. The company denied them $36 million in bonuses and royalties they had been expecting. The lawsuit that followed alleged that Activision had been actively constructing a reason to terminate them before those bonuses came due. West and Zampella sued for wrongful termination. Other Infinity Ward employees joined the suit. Activision countersued. The whole thing ran for years and eventually settled for an undisclosed amount after a $42 million payment to other former employees during that trial. The details are ugly in the specific way that corporate disputes are ugly, which is to say they are mostly about money and who gets to keep it, dressed up in a language about conduct and insubordination. A month after being fired, West and Zampella founded Respawn Entertainment. They signed with EA to publish their next game, retained rights to their own IP, and proceeded to build something from scratch. The point was never to be in that position again, to own the thing they made. I wonder where we heard that one before. Respawn made Titanfall, then Titanfall 2, one of the finest first-person shooters ever built. The campaign is a particular kind of miracle, a story about a soldier and his mech that should not work as well as it does, that trusts the player to feel the weight of what is happening in the world without explaining it to death. The multiplayer movement system was something genuinely new. Wall running, double jumping, the rhythm of it, once you understood, it felt like nothing else in the genre. And it sold well below expectations. Titanfall 2 was a comfort game for me. I streamed it during COVID and had a great time finally understanding what this community had been talking about. Why the same people who loved that game genuinely grieved the absence of a third entry while watching the studio that made it pour resources into Apex Legends. The campaign is something I recommend to people who tell me games cannot tell a good story in under 10 hours. It does, quietly, without making a fuss about it. The reason it sold poorly has less to do with the game itself and more to do with EA releasing it 1 week after Battlefield 1 and 2 weeks before Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Both of those games were consuming all the oxygen in the shooter market. The window Titanfall 2 launched into was essentially a graveyard. Whether EA made that decision knowingly is a question worth asking. What is documented is that they made it. EA acquired Respawn in December of 2017. Apex Legends launched in February of 2019 as a free-to-play battle royale built on Titanfall's engine and movement system, and it became one of the most successful games EA has ever published. The founders had escaped one publisher under genuinely hostile circumstances, built their own studio, and got acquired by a second publisher, and watched the franchise that was supposed to represent their creative independence get redirected into a product they did not set out to build. The IP they retained the rights to, the direction it went, was not their call anymore. Some of them left again. Wildlight Entertainment. A game that needs no introduction. Their own terms this time. No publisher. Their own studio. And their own game. That very game launched in early access, and it was shut down within months of its release when Tencent pulled funding. The developers found out through layoff notices. Reports at the time indicated the team believed they had at least a few more months before any decisions needed to be made about the game's future. They did not have a few more months. They had layoff notices, One developer described on a LinkedIn post what it felt like to watch that trailer get torn apart the night of the Game Awards, which, I will note, was the equivalent of watching somebody throw a fire onto an already ongoing fire. They said the discourse, the people online who had never touched the game and were never going to, had some very dark corners that may have accelerated the timeline of failure. They were careful to say it was not the primary cause. The primary cause was that the money left. The people who loved the work enough to leave a bad situation built something with their own hands, and the same structural conditions followed them out the door. The passion got them out. The passion built the thing. The investors who backed the passion are still investors. They still have a number in mind. And when the number stops working, the passion is not what gets protected. The dog gets kicked, and it tries to do something. Clear Obscure, Expedition 33 came out in April of 2025. Over 1 million copies in its first 2 days. It became a conversation almost instantly. The kind of game that people who do not usually talk about games were texting each other about. Sandfall Interactive, the studio that made it, was founded by people who came out of Ubisoft. I'm going to be precise about this because for some reason I see a bunch of comments and just a bunch of whatever. People seem to think that there was a mass exodus of Ubisoft employees that came out to build this, but in reality, it was only 3. I'm sure many of you, myself included, initially pictured a full breakaway faction. The reality is smaller and in some ways more pointed. Just 3 people. What connects them to the broader story is the context they left behind. A former Assassin's Creed and Far Cry director said publicly that Ubisoft had become very allergic to new ideas. He called it talent drain. I personally call it bankrupt. That framing, allergic to new ideas, is doing a lot of work in a short phrase. It's describing a culture where the instinct to protect existing franchises and existing revenue models has become stronger than the instinct to just create, to build. Where the size of the institution has become an argument against the risk that good work requires. The balance sheet is the balance sheet. But something in the creative culture had stopped working. Enough that the people who built some of the most recognizable games decided the institutional conditions were not survivable for the kind of work that they personally wanted to do. The people who left made a JRPG. The same genre that Square Enix tried to convince nobody else wanted. A JRPG set in a dying world with painted monsters and a turn-based combat system that actually asked you to pay attention. Wasn't a live service, and it wasn't a platform designed to monetize engagement over years. It was just a game with a beginning, middle, and an end that asked something of the player and trusted them to meet it. One of the best reviewed games in years, built by a smaller team with fewer resources because the people making it were not being handed a mandate about what it had to earn before they were allowed to finish it. I'm still working through it myself. I bought it on launch. Now that I have a better rig than when I started, but as with all things in life, much like the game itself, time is a resource. Sandfall got out, and Kaplan is building something new. The Respawn founders tried and hit a different wall. For every Expedition 33 out there, there is a high guard. The exit is real. The odds on the other side are not guaranteed, and the gap between those two outcomes is not purely about talent or effort. It's about whether the funding holds, whether the market is in the right place, whether the thing you built lands at the right moment for the right audience to find it. There's also a question I have, whether one breakout success from a studio built by people who escape bad situations is enough to make the industry reconsider how it treats people that are still inside it. The honest answer is probably not. The industry reads success as a template and tries to replicate the output without replicating the conditions. And the conditions that produced Expedition 33 require specific people to have years of their time wasted somewhere else. I don't like that template, but that's the cost that got paid without ever being acknowledged. I want to be honest about something, dear viewer. When I started researching this video, and when I was writing my thesis about what I thought the shape of it was going to be, exploitation and the C-suite level, the way developers absorb conditions that other industries would not accept simply because the work matters to them personally, the way that love becomes a lever, I had that story in mind. But I think I would be doing a disservice if I did not discuss the players, the very thing that this medium is built for. The developers absorb pressure from above, management, publishers, the acquisition weight, CFO meetings, revenue targets they did not set, hiring patterns they can't fight, creative decisions made 3 floors up by people who have never shipped a game. And then they go online and absorb it from below as well. The same audience whose passion supposedly justifies the whole enterprise. In 2023, a Destiny 2 community manager highlighted fan art created by a black creator by the name of Agis as part of a regular community initiative, something Bungie had done consistently over the years, celebrating the people who made things because they loved the game. A player named Jesse James Comer responded by launching what the court would later describe as a campaign of racist, stochastic terrorism against the community manager and his family. Multiple voicemails to his personal phone. Multiple voicemails to his wife's personal phone. Voicemails containing requests for in-game options that would allow only people of color to be killed. A pizza ordered to their home address paid on delivery, with instructions to bang loudly on the door. And after the community manager restricted his public visibility, Comer called his wife to let her know he was still aware of where they lived. Bungie sued, naturally. They hired investigators to identify Comer, contacted local police, arranged executive protection for the employee and his family. They won nearly $490,000 in damages. The ruling established a new common law tort in Washington state, making it easier for studios to pursue future cases of this kind. Comer did not show up to defend himself. The community manager took a leave of absence. Other community managers reduced their public presence. Bungie's communication with its player base contracted, visibly, because the people whose job it was to communicate were afraid of what that communication invited. Luke Smith, the game director who oversaw Destiny 2 through Forsaken, through Beyond Light, through Witch Queen, through the years that the game was genuinely great, deleted his Twitter account. It wasn't a break like some people take. It was permanent. The volume and content of what people said to him publicly about patch notes, about the weapon balance, about seasonal content being vaulted, was enough to make someone who had given over a decade of his career to a franchise decide that access was not worth it. Personally. Not what it cost the game, what it cost him. And just as a side note, last week's episode I attempted to pull a tweet from Luke Smith directly about the earnings call that Activision had. I personally remembered that tweet, and I forgot that Luke Smith even deleted his Twitter, which I was not able to find a reference for. For those of you that actually look at the citations in the description, you probably would have noticed that they're pretty lapsed. That is on me. Community manager Dylan Gaffner said it plainly at the time. Cases of harassment against developers had actively made it harder for Bungie to communicate with the broader community, and it had impacted more studios than just theirs. Riot Games responded to the Bungie ruling with relief, so did developers across the industry. One wrote publicly that if you are someone who harasses the actual humans trying to make the very thing that you say you love, now there is a legal precedent built specifically for you. The reaction from the broader developer community was not a surprise. That someone had finally taken the thing seriously enough to go to court over it and win. The dog gets kicked from both directions. Management extracts the passion at the top. A fraction of the audience, a loud and sometimes dangerous faction, punishes it from the bottom. The people in the middle, The ones who actually make the games keep showing up anyway. They keep making the thing, keep engaging with the community even when the community gives them every reason not to. That is the love, and it is still the lever. The dog gets kicked, and it tries to do something else. The people who made Halo 2 loved it enough to rewrite the entire game in under a year. The code they produced under that pressure was so broken that 2 decades later, rebuilding it required deciphering 3,000 lines of barely documented script from a crunch that nearly ended careers. Jason Jones took a sabbatical after shipping it to figure out if he even still wanted to make games. The dig site team loved the E3 demo enough to spend years of their own time preserving it for free, and got told that their devotion was not serious enough to constitute real stakes. Jeff Kaplan thought he would retire from Blizzard. He left after a CFO told him 1,000 people's jobs would be a fault of his if revenue did not hit a certain number. A number he did not set. Inside a financial model he didn't design, for a product whose commercial strategy had been determined by people who had never shipped a game. Jason West and Vince Zampella built 2 of the best-selling franchises in history of the medium and got fired before their bonuses cleared. They built their own studio, got acquired, and watched their IP become something they did not plan. Some of the people who came after them built something new, and found out through a layoff notice that the funding had already left. A community manager did his job, highlighted a black creator's work, and spent months afraid in his own home. Luke Smith gave a decade to a franchise and decided the access was not worth the cost. Glenn Israel spent 17 years at a studio and left after watching someone tell volunteer modders that their love for the game did not count as understanding real stakes. These are not unrelated events. They are the same pattern expressed across different buildings at different times. The institution identifies the passion, it tests how much the passion will absorb, and then it keeps pushing until the passion leaves or the passion breaks, because either outcome is workable from the institution's perspective. If the passion stays, the work continues. If it leaves, there is always another passionate person willing to take the job. The dog gets kicked enough times, and it tries something else. Sometimes it leaves and builds Expedition 33. Sometimes it builds Highguard, and the money walks out before anyone got to find out whether the thing was any good. Sometimes it stays and watches everything it made get filed into a quarterly report under a category called underperforming assets. Sometimes it gets called into a CFO'S office and told that a number on a spreadsheet is now a moral obligation. Halo Studios rebranded, the name changed, the building didn't. The person who spent 17 years at the franchise raised concerns about what was happening inside it. The modders who gave years of their own time out of love for a franchise and rebuilt a legendary demo from broken code that the studio itself had abandoned are gone. The franchise is still there. The questions about what it is and who it is for have not gone anywhere. The industry does not have a talent problem. The people making your favorite games are extraordinary at what they do. What it has is a structural habit, a habit of treating extraordinary people as anything but, of measuring the value of genuine human devotion in revenue targets and headcount decisions, of learning again and again that the love will absorb it, and learning that lesson too well. The people who make games you love and why you love them are still out there. They are also the last people the structure is built to protect. The dog gets kicked. I am Agis. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody. I want to thank everyone that's been watching the videos as of late. I know I'm only up to 3 so far, but this project and what it means so far, just to my writing and what it means to try to put my voice out there, has been a pretty eye-opening experience. I hope that in time my stories and the things I have to share about the industry will bring some nuance to games media as a whole. There's a lot more that I would like to discuss, and more of that will be coming soon. Until then, all I can say is thank you for watching.